To have him as part of the team here at the Values Voters Summit. Folks, it may surprise you that there are now 23 states that allow medicinal marijuana. 2 states now with recreational marijuana, so we know where that's going, and you have to question, is this a good idea? Well, coming to talk about it is Louisiana House Representative John Fleming, who is also a medical doctor. During his time in Congress, he has worked tirelessly on a balanced budget, health care reform, and protecting religious liberty in the military. Comes now to talk about this issue of legalized marijuana. Would you please welcome Congressman Dr. John Fleming.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be with you today. Are y'all having fun in Washington? Let's see some energy and some excitement here today. Well, welcome to Washington. Of course, as a member of Congress, I can't wait to get out of Washington. My friends, we're here today to discuss the things that bond us together, issues concerning our culture and our civilization, the threats that may loom before us. Among these are life, marriage, and the family, the role of God and government in our lives. In order to better understand the place of social values in society, we often talk about the end results of poor decisions and what we can do to pick up the pieces of broken families, broken lives, and broken bodies. Unfortunately, we often ignore the root causes of poor decision-making. I want to focus your attention today on one of the major root causes of our social problems in the hope that you will join me in taking on a difficult but solvable problem: drug abuse, particularly marijuana. Now, why talk about marijuana? I'd love to talk about sexier things like religious liberty, but listen to this. This is very important and very fundamental at this point in time. Very simply, marijuana is trending toward a socially and legally accepted drug, despite the important information now coming to light. Some years ago, as a physician and a parent, I wrote a book on this subject based on then data that has since been corroborated by recent studies. Here's the top line. Marijuana use is growing rapidly among teens and children, with social and legal acceptance acting as a powerful catalyst. And this will have devastating consequences for years to come on our families and on our society. Let me catch you up with what science has confirmed. The human brain does not fully mature until the early to mid-20s. My wife says it's much later than that in husbands. The brain continues to prune and reprogram itself through the formative years of life based on environmental stimuli. The average person's first exposure to drugs, especially marijuana, is usually in the early teens and sometimes even younger. The younger a child or teen experiments with an illegal drug, marijuana being the most common, the more likely he or she will become addicted. The corollary to this is that the longer a teen waits to experiment with illegal drugs, the more likely he or she will avoid a lifelong addiction. Once that developing brain adapts itself to drug abuse and addiction, the battle to escape addiction will be lifelong. Though some level of chronic management and recovery is possible, backsliding into drug use again and again is more the rule than the exception. Since writing my book, Preventing Addiction, 7 years ago, even more sobering data has come to light. Here are 4 more facts. Number 1, 16.5% of 8th graders have experimented with marijuana. Almost 40% of 10th graders have experimented also with pot. Nearly half of 12th graders have experimented with this highly addictive substance. And we also know that 6.5% of 12th graders are daily marijuana users. And their 12th grade peers, 60%, do not think there's any harm in regular marijuana use. But they don't know the facts, and that I'm going to share with you today. Of all the drugs kids abuse, legal and illegal, marijuana remains the drug of choice. Drug rehabilitation centers inform us that marijuana addiction is by far the most common diagnosis of teens treated in their facilities. As you know, there's been a trend over the past few decades to first medicinalize, then decriminalize, and then legalize marijuana in various states across the country. While pot was part of a marginalized culture in the 1960s, and yes, I'm old enough to remember those days of the 1960s, it is rapidly becoming a mainstream accepted behavior as evidenced in polling and in the relaxation of laws in many states. And how did this happen? As early as the 1970s, it was suggested that dying cancer patients could benefit from smoking marijuana, mainly to assist with nausea. Somehow, without any real science, this morphed into the idea that marijuana is actually a safe, natural treatment for many illnesses and is otherwise harmless and non-addictive. Consequently, as Gil said, 23 states and the District of Columbia have now legalized the medicinal use of marijuana, such that as of last year, there were more medical marijuana dispensaries in Denver, Colorado than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. Areas of California were also reporting more pot dispensaries than Starbucks coffee shops. Is it really that many sick people in California? Dare I go there? It's like marijuana became a magic cure-all. But is it more likely a dangerous snake oil marketed by powerful financial interests? 16 states in the District of Columbia have taken the next step and decriminalized marijuana, and 2 states, Colorado and Washington, have now fully legalized marijuana for recreational use. And as I and others would argue, the states have taken these steps based on commonly held myths. Dr. Kevin Sabet, who advised the Bush and Obama administration's drug policy offices, has written an excellent book on these myths. It's called Reefer Sanity. I highly recommend it. Here are just some of the myths. Myth number 1, marijuana is a medicine. After decades of study, we have found no beneficial medical use for the raw marijuana plant, a Schedule I illegal drug under the federal law. It is true that the active ingredient, THC, can make cancer patients feel better. But this is much more safely achieved through the use of synthetic THC, marketed as Marinol, a Schedule III drug, which your doctor can prescribe for you very safely and very legally. There are also anecdotal claims that an oil extract from a marijuana plant not containing the active component THC may be useful in certain rare childhood seizure disorders. The FDA is fast-tracking this drug and will approve it for use under the supervision of a physician, if proven safe and effective. Number 2, marijuana is not addictive. Yes, it is addictive, folks. This is a complete myth. There is a well-documented withdrawal syndrome that any treatment center employee can describe for you. Marijuana users can face intense difficulties getting off this drug. The next one, marijuana is harmless. First, marijuana smoke contains tar that is 4 times more potent than tobacco, which is known to cause lung disease and cancer. So how could it be good for you to smoke something that's more dangerous than cigarettes? Second, recent sophisticated brain imaging studies show profound abnormal changes to the brain in even casual marijuana users. Other studies show a spike in auto accidents, schizophrenia, and suicides relating to marijuana use. In Colorado, there are growing reports of pot-infused cookies and candies, many with dangerously high levels of THC, the intoxicating chemical in marijuana. A poison center in Colorado has reported about 50% spike in calls from people having adverse reactions to marijuana, adults and children. It's naive to think that pot cookies and candy won't end up in the hands of teenagers and even younger children. Employee drug tests in Colorado have shown an increase of more than 20% positive marijuana tests from one year to the next, raising serious issues of safety and productivity in the workplace. Similar numbers were found among tests of drivers in Washington State. In Colorado, the number of drivers involved in fatal crashes that tested positive for marijuana use doubled from 1994 to 2011. In a report released in August, the number of Colorado drivers testing positive for pot and involved in traffic fatalities increased 100% between 2007 and 2012. Do you want to be driving among them? I don't. And I certainly don't want my family driving. My wife served for several years as a CASA worker, you know, the court-appointed special advocate. Her job was to assist the courts in being an advocate for children in problem homes. Virtually always the central problem in the home was addiction of one, if not both, parents. Myth number 4, this is the same marijuana used in the 1960s. The truth is that the marijuana grown today contains almost 4 times the amount of THC than it did in previous generations. The THC concentration then was 4%. Today it hovers around 15%. Number 5, there are many people in prison today because of simple marijuana use. What a myth, folks. I've spoken to a number of experts in research and law enforcement, and they make it very clear that this is simply not true. This myth derives from the fact that when marijuana users are arrested for more serious crimes, marijuana possession may be an added charge. People also plead down from more severe charges, selling or distributing marijuana, to just simple possession. Typically, a user of marijuana, if arrested, will appear in court and be fined and not in prison, and oftentimes directed towards some type of treatment. Number 6, marijuana produces a lot of revenue to the state treasury. You will hear this more and more, and it will end marijuana's black market. Thus far, the Colorado experiment has not brought in an avalanche of revenue, and the black market remains as robust as ever. Any meager increase in tax revenues will be offset in higher social costs. Already an increase in homeless people are moving to Colorado has been reported. As social problems and crimes increase, so will the burden on the Treasury to provide for broken families, broken lives, and broken bodies. And finally, myth number 7. Marijuana is not a gateway drug, folks. Again, studies show otherwise. Teens who use marijuana regularly and early in life are far more likely to become addicted to even more dangerous drugs like crack, methamphetamine, and heroin. All addicting drugs are gateway drugs. Who told me this? Drug addicts told me this. Marijuana just happens to be the most frequently first used drug. Now, my libertarian friends argue that taxpayers and society in general should not make or enforce laws that dictate to them how they should behave or what they should do with their lives when it comes to drugs. My answer is, it is the same taxpayers who will be required to take care of you and your family once drugs have led to your broken families, broken lives, and broken bodies. If you truly want a smaller government, then you will oppose the legalization of marijuana. Have I convinced you yet? Very good. So why should you care now, and what should you do about this growing wave of acceptance of marijuana use across this country? First, it is important to remember that as marijuana becomes more acceptable in certain states, complacency builds and the fear of its harmful effects and legal consequences begin to dissipate. The net effect is more kids using drugs. It ends up in homes, folks. The more acceptable and the less fear and the fewer threats there are to legal action or harm, the more likely it's going to be in homes, maybe not your home, but it's going to be in your neighbor's home. Studies show that the addiction rate for those who begin smoking marijuana as an adult is 1 in 11. For teens, it is 1 in 6. And what is the impact on society? It has been well documented that many of our social ills derive directly or indirectly from drug addiction. Spouse abuse, child abuse, motor vehicle accidents, suicides, mental illness, and failed marriages can often be linked to drug addiction. And too often there's a link back to our good friend, marijuana. You know, in Denver, a 48-year-old man will soon stand trial for shooting his wife while she was on the phone with police, panicked at his erratic behavior as the result of ingested marijuana. The only substance reported to be found in his bloodstream was THC. Earlier this year, a 19-year-old college student jumped to his death in Denver after eating a single $10 THC-infused cookie. Friends who were with him said that the young man began acting crazy, hallucinating, and smashing things in the hotel room before running outside and tumbling over the railing. Some will argue that those are just anecdotal examples. Even though they are among the earliest casualties, we will undoubtedly see many more examples with the increasing availability and acceptance of marijuana. My friends, as marijuana and other addicting drugs are determined by society to be more acceptable and legal, we are certain to see more broken families, broken lives, and broken bodies, and deaths. Be prepared, as this will lead to a greater burden on taxpayer-funded social services and an increasing entitlement state to help those families destroyed by addiction. That's why the time for us to speak up on this issue is now. And I would urge you to join me in this fight to stop the medicinalization, the decriminalization, and the legalization of marijuana in the state houses across America, as well as in our own federal government. Thank you, and God bless.